Afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple of housekeeping items before we kick off, please. There is captioning available at the bottom of your screen. If you look, there's some options under More. If you've got a question at all, please feel free to raise your hands. We've got some fabulous people here to talk today. I've got my CEO, Nasser Siabi, who will introduce himself in a minute. We've got Marley from HSBC and the lovely Tanya, who works on her own as a consultant, but was from EY. And it's a really interesting piece to see how big business, well, for me, how big business work with employing young people who are neurodiverse, who are deaf, who are visually impaired, or who've got other needs. And they've really taken the challenge on. And I think there's a lot that business can learn from it. So, Nasser, could you do the honours and start by introducing yourself, please?
Of course. Thank you, Tracy. And hi, I'm Nasser Siabi. I'm the co-founder and chief executive of Microlink. I've been in this industry since 1992, so I'm an oldie in comparison to what's going on. Over to you, Malik, please.
Nasser, thank you so much for having me, and Tracy inviting me as well. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege always to have a discussion with you guys. Hi, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Marley, I'm the Group Head of Digital Experience and Accessibility for HSBC. I'm also the founder of HSBC's Digital Accessibility Program. Just to give you a sense of what I look like, I'm wearing a white shirt, and I'm also wearing specs. I'm an Asian man who's no longer in their late 30s. So I'll leave you to kind of decide how old I am. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Tanya.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. My name is Tanya Martin, and I am, as Tracy mentioned, the founder of an organisation called Peg Squared. I'm a neurodiversity consultant, but probably better known in the neurodiversity world for the person who built EY's Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence. And I'm really excited to be here today to share a little bit about the learning of the journey that we went through at EY around neurodivergent opportunity creation, probably the best way to put it.
Wonderful. I mean, to give some context, I don't know how many of you sat and listened to Miss Rees yesterday talking about the budget, because I'm not actually in work this week. I actually did sit and listen to the budget. It felt tremendously grown up. I can remember Mum and Dad doing it. I've never done it. This was the first time ever. But they are moving towards, youth. What were they talking? Youth guarantee, trailblazing sections. There's a real imperative for us as a country to get our young people into work, into sustainable work, whatever their background, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's they've got a disability, whether they're neurodivergent. We need to do better at doing this. And more importantly, for me personally, I work within disability. So for me, it really is a passion play, is the individuals that do think differently, that are neurodivergent, the individuals that do have a disability that's maybe non-visible. I mean, Marley, you'll talk about some of your guys that you've taken on your apprenticeships. It really is a life-changing thing, opportunity that we're hoping to give. The money that's available, that Ms. Rees has made available, 240 million for the trailblazing. Connect to Work is going to be replacing universal support, which is great. That's 115 million. That's where local authorities can actually apply for a grant. The reality is, though, how many local authorities actually place people with disabilities? Because I'm guessing that's going to be a really low number. And then on top of that, you've got the Shared Prosperity Fund, which I think I'm going to go for a grant, because I'd like a bit of shared prosperity. That's 900 million. So there's a lot of money around. But what I'm really interested in, and I'm going to ask Marley and then Tanya to kind of talk you through what they've done within their organizations already. And then Nasser, if you could pick up a bit on what you did with the Kickstart people that we had during the pandemic, which is a while ago, but it was still superbly effective for those young people and was life-changing. So Marley, can I leave it with you to kick off, please?
Of course, Tracy. So If I think about how it is we're diversifying our workforce, for us, this is, we've approached this in a number of ways. The first thing is to make sure that we as an organization are ready to welcome that diverse group of people. And for us, that starts with making sure our workforce, our partners have the right expertise, right? The right skills to make sure actually whether you're building a website, an app, you're thinking about a broad range of users. So what we have is, and I'll talk about the apprenticeship program in just a moment, but what we have is a multi-layered program. So if you are somebody who is in a non-technical role, go use the Accessibility Hub. It's publicly available now. We made it publicly available as of January this year. We want to give away our expertise to the whole world. So please do use it. And that's very much aimed at somebody who's I fondly refer to technologists as geeks, for somebody who's not a geek, who wants to kind of understand the basics. What is disability? What are the numbers? Why is it important? And the power of technology to either be a great enabler or present another barrier. The next level down is we have e-learning courses for specific roles. We have a training course for every type of digital professional. And we wanted to make sure that as we are building products and services, whether it's for customers or on people, where our technology is accessible. And then, of course, we have our in-person training. So if you really want to, get into this and you really want that sort of expertise and the depth to make sure you've got the right skills, we've got that for you as well. So we've got a sort of 3-layered training program for our people, which we've also made publicly available. And look, year to date, I'm really proud. We thought we'd done well last year, but year to date, we've trained 158,464 people, of which 95% of those are outside of HSBC. We recognize the role our international brand and company can play in really making a difference, right? So that's just a little bit of the backstory before I kind of get into the apprenticeship program. Why apprentices? Why did we do this? Look, we want to have a more diverse workforce, right? Organizations must have a more diverse workforce. And I suspect Tanya, Tracy, Nasser, can elaborate on why that is far better than a simple technologist like myself, right? But, our argument is very simple. To be able to better take care of our customers, we need a workforce that has a similar composition to the societies that we belong to, right? And that includes a large number of people who are disabled, a large number of customers who are neurodivergent, and customers who are older, right? So actually, how do we kind of diversify our workforce? And for us, an apprenticeship program seems like a fantastic thing to do, because also it's giving opportunity to people that may not have historically and typically considered HSBC as a place to make a career. Now, I'm sure we'll get into the mechanics of it in further down in the conversation. But last year we launched a digital accessibility apprenticeship program specifically and exclusively for disabled or neurodiverse apprentices, because we want to make sure that we broaden this group of employees in terms of representation within our organization. And it was the first time we did it. My team is used to making things like our recruitment platform accessible, but of course, this was something quite different for us. And it's, of course, I have to thank all of the colleagues across the bank, particularly in our recruitment team, who partnered up with us with as much excitement, I must confess, as we had for doing this, right? We made 3 positions available. And I remember one of the things that just before we opened the positions publicly, somebody asked me, Mali, what happens if we don't have enough people applying? And it's something I hadn't considered, right? Now, we didn't have that problem. For the 3 positions, we had over 600 applicants. So we didn't have any problem with talent. And, it was, the interview process was just truly incredible, right? In the end, we identified, who we felt were the 3 best candidates. 2 of them are neurodivergent, and 1 of them is deaf nonverbal, right? They started in January of this year. They're going through a formal apprenticeship program. And upon completion next year, we are going to offer them a full-time job in HSBC, a permanent job. I want them to stay, but look, if they turn around and say, look, Mali, I've got a better offer from Apple, I'd say, hey, look, no hard feelings. HSBC is still, of course, better to work for, but hopefully at a moment in time when they've got an amazing career at another organization, they'll remember that actually HSBC helped them get into the corporate world. Tracy, I've spoken at you guys for a few minutes. I'm sure Tanya and yourself have a lot of thoughts.
Can I just ask a question? I mean, 600 applicants. Do you think that's because obviously the pulling power of HSBC, great organization? Was it the type of work? Was it how you, I mean, what was different about how you put it out in the market?
Of course. Look, we really thought through the entire thing all the way down to our job ads, right? And the entry requirements, right? So we didn't put out a generic job ad because I'll be very open with this audience. My colleagues in risk were like, Marley, why don't we put out a generic job ad and then work with our specialist partners, folk like yourself or Scope, to bring in, disabled or neurodivergent employees, right? It's a lot less in banking terms risky, right? This carries a lot of risk. Are you prepared to swallow that risk as an individual? I said, yes, absolutely, right? And NASA knows this. We were speaking about it just before we went live on the webinar. There was a lot of anxiety because I wasn't quite sure what we would get from in the public domain, right? Are people going to critique us? But I knew it was really important that an organization like HSBC took a position of leadership, right? And if a conservative organization like HSBC can take a position of leadership, then organizations which are less risk averse can do this. And it doesn't have to be in digital accessibility. It could be in accounting. It could be in some other field, right? But somebody's got to go out there and take some level of risk and go, you know what? It's okay. This can be done. There's great talent out there. So we thought about everything. We thought about our ad to make sure that actually, it was simple. We made sure that the reading age was right. We made sure that, the requirements were the absolute minimum that were required from the apprenticeship program so that we had as broad a group of people as possible. Because we know that in certain corporate environments, there are requirements around things like degrees or other elements, which mean that actually for somebody who's either neurodivergent or disabled, where traditional education doesn't really support them in the way that they should be supported, they may not have the same academic qualifications, right? So what we really were looking for was, things like the right attitude. Somebody was going to finish the course through. Somebody was really looking to make a career in this space, right? And we've got some amazing people, right? And of course, it's kind of given us a different perspective, right? In terms of different social economic backgrounds, a different age demographic as well, right? So it's I think when you really think something through, and it may have been helped by the fact that we had fantastic support from folk like Microlink, basically saying, look, this is a great program, go for it. So I suspect for a number of reasons, we had a number of candidates apply that we were frankly very surprised by in a positive way.
But actually, Marley, how do we capture that magic formula and bottle it so that others could actually repeat what you've done? What you just described is what a lot of companies struggle to do. They don't have the confidence, they don't have the know-how. You've done it. And I think the fact that you had 600 candidates for 3 positions tells me there's 200 other employees out there who could just literally go and take those other 600 left. But they don't know about what great work you've done. How do we amplify what you've done and make sure the world actually hears about it?
Of course, Nasser. So look, I'm going to say in the new year, I can't believe we're talking about 2025 already. We are going to talk about this more publicly, and get the message out there. The message for anybody listening is, this is no secret. We would love to give away our expertise. And guys, just to be clear, my team and I, we're a group of technologists. We're not recruitment professionals. By any means, we know how to make recruitment platform accessible, but the recruitment process, it's not our area of expertise, right? We got people excited who are specialists in this area, because actually when we shared with them our vision, our dream, who wouldn't get excited, right? But we'd love to share it with other organizations. We're not here to kind of, hold back. And I can speak on behalf of my entire team, as well as my colleagues in the recruitment teams that we worked with. There is no joy like watching another organization replicate what we do, right? So if there's another company that wants to do it, please reach out to me via Microlink or LinkedIn. we aren't, looking to kind of hold the keys, close to our chest. We love to give away our expertise. We don't have all the answers. We made mistakes along the way. And I'm sure, if you speak to the apprentices, they'll tell you there were things that could have been done better. And I suspect that is very much true. But I think, you've got to try this. We've been, it's just been such a revelation. And I'd love to see other companies do it. So any questions you have, we'll give away our expertise and our experience, as we've learned through sort of the last year or so.
Many years ago, the employee engagement group, which I was part of, a steering group, which then turned into Disability Confident, they commissioned me to do a study about young people leaving education into employment. And we found some disturbing figures, like 180,000 young people will come out of education with no prospect for employment. Now, as it happens, 8 years on, we're now finding the reasons why because most of them have problem dealing with barriers because of the neurodivergency, so the neurodiverse. And they are perfect for certain jobs. I won't stereotype them, they're good for digital, but a lot of them have that affinity for digital platforms. So we have also massive demand coming from the industry because of the directives and regulations on accessibility. So there's a shortage of staff at that front. Why can't we link up what you've done, great work, to what? So where there's a demand, there's also the candidates. That's where we need to join dots. And I think we need something higher than us, like the new government, to take this matter very seriously, really bring together good employers who need to do this to comply with the regulations and the law, and also speak to, advanced employers like yourself, and say, well, what have you done at work? Everybody else, please share that. And this is a great example of how we could actually bring a big change very quickly. Because the young people really are desperate for jobs that they want to do, they can do, but there is no way of getting them into employment.
Can we have Tanya? Can you share some of the experiences that you had?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I had a really unique role in that I was 100% of my time focused on neurodiversity within a large organization, and I had a team around me. And there is not many people that have been able to expose themselves to neurodiversity in a large corporate, like me and my team did when I was at EY. So let me tell you a little bit about the Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence, what it is and where it started, just to give you some context. So it actually started quite a while ago in the US. There were a group of organisations that got together and started talking about neurodiversity about 9 years ago. And Hiran Shukla, who is still the global lead for the Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence, he was in innovation and technology, similar to where HSBC are, and he saw a link between the fact that we had this talent shortage within the technology space and this pool of candidates that just simply weren't getting the opportunities to get into organisations like EY. So he initially looked at this in terms of an autism at work program, which is a fairly standard practice. That's not unusual from an employability program perspective. And he set up the first NCOE, and then after doing it for a little while, decided actually it's not just those that are autistic that potentially struggle to get into the organisation. Let's look at all neurotypes in terms of when we go out to recruit. So that was 9 years ago. It grew to over 500 technologists globally, centres around the world. And I had the absolute privilege of setting up the centre in Manchester 3 years ago. We're working really closely with Hiran and team. And this was all about opportunity creation for those that couldn't get through a traditional recruitment process. If we think about the stats, so if you look at autism, 29% of people who are autistic are in employment. That is a really, really small number. And one of the reasons why traditional recruitment routes are such a barrier to entry for individuals who are neurodivergent is because what they're looking for are well-rounded individuals. They're not considering the spiky profiles of those that are neurodivergent. So when we went to set up the NCOE in the UK, it was very much focused on data analysts and data scientists. And what I found most interesting was, from my experience, so my background, I started in recruitment many, many, many years ago. So I have got a bit of a recruitment background. But in the in-between phase between that and the NCOE, I spent most of my career doing transformation and process improvement type work. So organizational design, SAP implementations, really, really broad. All of it has a massive people change element to it. And when I was involved with the Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence and starting to understand neurodiversity, I literally look back on my 17-year career and go, I would have done it so differently knowing what I know now. Because actually, when you start attracting those that have these spiky profiles into organizations, and you start asking what doesn't work, it's incredibly eye-opening in terms of some of the information that they give back to you. What was incredibly interesting in the UK is that when we started talking about this 3 years ago in EY, we were very vocal about what we were doing, both internally and externally. And what happened as a result of starting to have those conversations about neurodiversity was really interesting. So if you had asked me the question in terms of what does success look like 3 years ago, I would have said, oh, we'll have 100 to 150 people through the Neurodiverse Centres of Excellence. We don't. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is as we started to talk about this, what we found is that people within the organization started to put their hand up and say, actually, we are here already. Our community at EY went from 150 to 2,000 people in 2 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my role became really fascinating. So it was like, what can I learn as a result of doing this, building this Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence, that we can actually start taking out into the broader organisation and starting to think about neurodiverse hiring differently. The really interesting thing about neurodiversity is that when you look at it from a DEI lens, when you think about DEI and increasing the numbers of people that you're trying to recruit across the other areas of DEI, it's simply about how do you attract them and integrate them into an organization. When you're talking about neurodiversity, what you're doing is going, I'd like to attract these individuals into the organization, and then I need to work out how the organization adapts in order to support those individuals. So it's a very different problem statement that you're dealing with when you're talking about neurodiversity. And one of the things that we found is that actually a lot of what you can put in place doesn't just help one neurodivergent individual. It often helps many neurodivergent individuals, and it often helps those that aren't neurodivergent as well. So it was incredibly interesting in terms of the learning we had around what does the employee life cycle look like when you put a neuro-inclusive lens over it, and how do you start to tweak at the organizational level as opposed to this right, we're going to just switch things up for one individual. So yeah, it was a really fascinating space to be.
What were some of the key learnings? Could you give me 2 or 3 of them? Because I'm keen to see whether or not they resonate with Marley and the people that he's had in his team.
Absolutely. So I think, as I said, recruitment's the biggest barrier. So I'll start there. If we think about attraction strategies, when you're looking for neurodivergent employees, big organizations tend to use the standard job boards. You can think differently about that really, really quickly. So they are starting to pop up neurodivergent hiring, specific hiring organisations, so recruiters. There are job boards that are neurodivergent specific as well. So there are ways that you can go out and actively recruit. Before you do that though, and I say this a lot, I would challenge every organisation to put their organisation and the word neurodiversity next to it and see what comes up on Google. And the reason
interesting.
The reason I say that is because if you're neurodivergent and you're about to apply to a big organisation, you're going to want to know how neuro-inclusive are they. You will be doing exactly that. And it is really fascinating to see. So what is the organisation's presence in terms of neurodiversity? It's all well and good hiring people who are neurodivergent into an organisation, but are there examples of leaders that are neurodivergent? So is there progression within an organisation? What are the positive stories of people that have been there and have stayed? When you think about adjustments, what's the approach to adjustments? What's the language around adjustments? Is it front and center in terms of when you're applying to a job? Are people genuinely wanting to help around putting adjustments in? Where can you adjust as like business as usual? Where can you, like John Lewis, when John Lewis came out and said, we're giving everybody access to the interview questions up front, everybody was like,
wasn't that an interesting thing? Yeah, but that's the whole thing. Everybody was going, oh my God. And I still constantly hear companies say to me, but Trace, that's not fair on the other candidates. And I said, but give it to everybody so it's a level playing ground.
Yeah.
You're not testing for those questions.
Correct.
You're not testing how people perform in an interview. You want to know if they can do the job.
Yeah.
And I think that's where so many companies go wrong.
100%. So we gave the interview questions up front for the NCOE.
Outrageous.
And I know, shocking, hey?
It was shocking.
And I have to tell you, the answers to those questions were more in depth. The interviews went quicker because people were prepared. And interviews are an information gathering exercise. And for us, when you're recruiting technologists or data scientists, we are much more interested in their ability to problem solve, deal with a piece of technology they have not seen before, how they approach that rather than the ability to regurgitate an answer that they might have learned up front from an interview. So for me, I guess the second piece is how truly skills-based is your recruitment process?
Yeah.
Very good. Now, Tanya, you mentioned something very important. The number is going from hundreds into thousands, which is actually, it's not by coincidence. It's right across the world. I will post something in the chat in a minute, which there's been something like few 100% increase in number of people recognized with the neurodiversity in the Western economies anyway. And that number is increasing. And that still is underrepresented because the data I've seen from US, which I will send, is 6 in 1,000. We know from data from the historical data, 2% of the population are on the autism spectrum. Okay, so that's but that doesn't represent, is not represented in the workplace. So there's plenty of room for improvement. There is another piece of another link I sent, which is extremely good if you want to watch it. It's a webinar, a podcast by Suzanne Scott Parker and Nancy Doyle. You'll love it. It's all about this current issue, how many people are coming forward with things like ADHD and autism. And what does it mean? Because there's a lot of emphasis on diagnostic and a lot of emphasis on getting this done through the medical or clinical route, whereas workplace adjustment is all about removing barriers. So employees shouldn't get bogged down with those. Why you are in that situation, just tell me what you need for you to be as good as you can be. And that's the kind of thing the employee should be looking at for. Every point you made is absolutely 100% valid in terms of look after your current workforce because you've got plenty. Then that's actually a good way to get confidence to attract new talent.
Yes.
And then, and then you're right. If you put yourself against the, against the measure of how good you are neuro-inclusive, it shows how good you are at being inclusive for everyone, because the practice is more or less universal. I'll send you those two links, and hopefully you will get time to watch and read them.
I think one of the biggest barriers organizations have is the language around neurodiversity, and actually that understanding of what neurodiversity actually is. Because I'm really honest, right? 4 years ago, if you'd asked me about neurodiversity, I couldn't define it for you. I would have probably jumped to the normal stereotypes that people jump to. I have ADHD myself. I found that out 3 years ago. I am not what I expected ADHD to look like. And that changing that understanding, changing people's perceptions around neurodiversity, I think is really important. Yeah, and I think that is the first step organizations need to take when they're talking about neurodiversity, is actually getting really clear on what the language is, and communicating that out to those that work within organizations.
And knowing how to support them best. Because one of the typical things, again, that I hear is that it's got to a combative situation where the language, the communication style of a line manager compared to the colleague hasn't quite worked. And it's not working, and it's that kind of, it's oiling that conversation and making it more pragmatic and down to earth. Marley, your guys.
I was going to say, Marley, you're the captain of the industry, and you've got tremendous respect for your business acumen. Now, there is one big issue with every economy we talk to: productivity loss. Now, here you have easy wins in terms of you've got talent. All you have to do is treat them differently, give them what they need, and then the productivity will go up without a doubt.
Absolutely. And personally, look, such a pleasure listening to Tanya speak, right? I could listen to you for hours, Tanya, and I wish we'd known each other a year ago. It would have saved me a lot of stress and time and effort, right? Because everything you're talking about, are things that I can relate to, right? Particularly about creating, and we're saying it the same thing, perhaps with slightly different words, but creating that sense of that safe space, right? People need to know that actually the organization that they're applying for is going to welcome them, whether it's the practicalities of the workplace adjustments, or actually that there are other people like them who are able to be themselves in the workplace, right? And I think, as our own sort of disability and neurodiversity journey matures, the number of people self-identifying and being themselves at work is only growing, right? And we're seeing that particularly across the world as well. Nasser, to answer your specific question on productivity, look, I remember I was interviewing, doing the final interviews for our apprenticeship program, and one of the candidates, I couldn't quite understand why they were applying for an apprenticeship program, right? So this specific individual had topped their batch in their undergrad, and had I think a BSc in computing, right? And they had just submitted their master's in cybersecurity, right? So I was looking at this going, why are you applying for an apprenticeship program, right? Clearly an exceptional individual, right? And I had to ask the question twice. I was like, look, why are you here? Why are you applying for an apprenticeship program, right? Because there are other things that you could do. And I think that the first time I answered, I got, a very professional answer, as you would expect. And the second time I asked the question, albeit in a slightly different way, but the same question, the response was, look, Marley, HSBC has seen my potential. Everybody else saw my disability. That was so powerful. That was so powerful, right? That was a great, that's what I thought. Now, so I was like, we're hiring you right now. What a great answer, right? And for me, talent is talent, right? Because at the end of the day, I want the best talent. And I think, when organizations look past their preconceptions, as Tanya mentioned, right? There's preconceptions, because I think, today we're talking about disability and neurodiversity. In the not too distant past, it was gender, right? I remember walking into a very senior group some years ago of our investment banking community in the bank. And I remember one of my friends is like, Marley, they're going to ask you this question. There's nobody who's blind who's an investment banker, right? They're going to say this to you, right? I was like, don't worry, mate. I got the answer for that, right? So I walked into the room and I was very pleasantly I don't want to say surprised, but it was very pleasant to see a broadly even split on in terms of gender, right? And I preempted the question before it was asked, right? So I said, look, I'm sure many of you are thinking, well, we don't have disabled, investment bankers, whether it's on our side as employees or on the customer side. Firstly, let's just be really clear. You're going to have a lot more neurodivergent people than you know, right? Some of them probably just haven't told you. And with regards to disability, I suspect many of you are a little bit older, probably also used to say we don't have any women investment bankers, but guess what? Half of them in this room are women, right? I knew I may have lost half the audience, but at least half of them were on my side, right? And I think, changing perceptions is really important, right? I think, Tanya touched on this. When I think about sort of problem solving, the ability for some of my neurodivergent employees to kind of approach those problems, but also the diversity that I have within my team across the world, it's a truly fantastic thing, right? Of course I'm biased, and I'm sure this may not be accurate, but I think I'm the best tech team in the bank, right? And I think the reason that is because of the diversity. It's the diversity of disability, the representation from a neurodiversity perspective, gender, but also social economic background, right? And that is a really powerful mix. It's a really powerful mix because for every problem, you don't have one perspective. We've got so many different perspectives to the same problem. And, it's often surprising when I meet larger teams that may be better funded that are dealing with the same problem that we have solved. They're like, how do you do this, right? It's like, well, we are the brain trust, right? Because we've got so many different perspectives, whereas you've got one or two perspectives, right? And so, of course, we're always going to do this better, right? Now, but to come back here productively, look, give people a chance, get over those sort of preconceptions that you have about people, create that environment, right? Your organization is going to be better for it. There's no question in my mind. Your organization is going to be better for it.
Can I just ask, Marley? You told me a great story about one of the young people on your apprenticeship. We'd been talking about the whole thing around soft bigotry, the low expectations that family, friends, schools, the wider community may have had of you if you didn't get. And I'm not, Nasser, close your ears. I haven't got all the degrees and everything that I may have told Nasser I've got. My education's really, really rubbish because I couldn't go through the school system. I couldn't cope with it.
Asking. That's good.
My maths, for example, I got unclassified. I still can't make 1 and 1 add up to 2. It just doesn't work for me. But the thing that I found is again, for lots of people going through the recruitment system, it's come up on the chat page here, is that people set these, you've got to have this, you've got to have that. And your parents are trying to protect you to a certain extent. My mum and dad, as I was growing up, said to me, go off, get yourself a trade. And in those days, women's trade was to learn how to type and do shorthand. So I went off to Pitman College. Nobody thought, well, okay, you're crap at maths, but let's go and find something else. I actually wanted to be a lawyer, which has nothing to do with maths. But I couldn't do that because I was rubbish at maths. But Marley, can you tell the story of that young man? Because it really hit home.
I can do. Tracy and I were having a chat, and it's really interesting. So one of the individuals who apprentices who joined my team, I learned so much through this process, things that I didn't expect to learn, right? Tech I get, right? It's quite a binary thing, build a website, launch an app, that I understand, do a business case, make the customer experience better, use AI to do something faster or automated, that I get, right? The sort of human side of this, we learned so much. So one of the apprentices, who made the final and subsequently also joined our team. I was just walking them down, right? Because I thought, look, I've got 30 minutes to interview these individuals, and my team has told me, and I don't believe them, Tracy. You tell me this is not true, but they're like, "Man, you're quite an intimidating chap, right? You're a big, tall bloke. You walk in, and you'll come in a smart suit. And, you know, for an apprentice who's never been to a formal job interview, that can be quite an intimidating thing. Chances are they've already seen the video of you plastered all over every sort of screen in an HSBC office. That's a lot, right? So you walk in. So I was like, yeah,
You are a bit
that's
of a rock star, Molly.
in my mind, I am, Tracy. In my mind.
In my mind too. In mine too. Yeah.
So what I really did was I wanted to make sure actually outside the formal interview, I'd kind of walk down with them, right? Because they probably got their nerves out. And then, you know, I could just kind of speak to them in an informal manner, right? Because I think, you know, I always say to my team, the cultural fit is just as important as sort of the skills they bring in, right? So this young chap, he was like, you know, Marley, you know, through this entire process, my family has been telling me, don't apply to HSBC. Don't apply to HSBC. You know, they're not going to take you. You know, you're not going to get a job. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's like, well, why are you wasting your time? Why don't you kind of do what the majority of his family did, which is kind of work in the care industry, right? And it's like, look, it's, you know, it's a good job. It may not be flashy, but you know, it's a good job, and you know, we're all doing it, right? And he comes from sort of this immigrant background, and of course we offered him the role, and he gladly accepted. I was having lunch with my team some months ago, and he's a cheeky chap. He's like, Marley, you know what's happened because I'm working for HSBC. I was like, I don't know what this guy's going to say to me, because he's a very funny chap. He's like, well, Marley, the kind of people who are approaching my father, inquiring whether I'm a single man in the community, wouldn't have dreamt of, you know, inquiring about me now, right? It has quite literally changed his entire social prospects, right? Because working for an HSBC, as opposed to where he would have otherwise, you know, had a career potentially, has completely, quite literally changed his trajectory in life, you know, and what an amazing thing, right? And I think, you know, if you think about the social economic aspect of disability and neurodiversity, you know, it's really important, because actually if you come from a certain economic background, shall we say, you're more privileged, chances are you will have access to a whole bunch of things that actually, if you came from a working class background, that you probably wouldn't have. Right, so actually,
but it does tell the story, though, doesn't it?
It does tell the story, right?
That you've got to engage with the families, not just the individuals, particularly with young people. And Tanya, did you have much of that with your Centre of Excellence?
Yeah, it's always incredibly fascinating hearing about people's backgrounds and journeys. I think there was one individual, so I'll give you a couple of examples. We had somebody who was super dyslexic in my team, to the point where on a daily basis, his line manager would sit down with him and literally go, read those 5 emails, ignore the rest. That's your focus, because he really struggled. That is an example of an adjustment, by the way, not expensive, but incredibly useful for him. And with the onset of AI that we're getting now, I think even easier. I know AI is amazing and it's changing my life as an ND person. So he was amazing at data visualization. So you gave him data and asked him to explain what that data is telling you. And we had a project with a client. It was an area of passion for him, the topic, and he had completed what we had expected to be a 3-week project in 2 days.
Wow.
He did such an amazing job. He managed to therefore build upon what we presented back to the client, and unsurprisingly, the client have now stolen him from EY for more money. So I would say that is absolutely a success story. He came from an organization before where he couldn't be openly neurodivergent without fear of being stigmatized and treated differently as a result. And he's incredibly happy where he's gone to. There is a flip side to this, though, where organizations get it wrong. And there were individuals within my team who weren't fresh out of university, but slightly later in their careers. And they came to the NCOE because they wanted to feel understood and because they wanted that safe space where they could truly just go, do you know what, I don't need to disclose because you're a neurodiverse centre of excellence. You know I'm neurodivergent, and that's why I'm applying. And they brought with them significant workplace trauma from where they had been treated poorly as a result of being autistic previously. And it was a real challenge for them. It was a real challenge for them to trust us. As a result, they really almost pushed the boundaries as much as they possibly could to say, right, do you know what? I'm not sure I
Prove it.
you. Yeah, literally prove it.
Yeah.
And it was really challenging at times because there were tears and there was emotion, and this individual had to really work through what had happened previously in a really safe space. And we learned really quickly. Transition was really challenging. So what can we do to make that easier? How can we support? That individual is still in the organization. She's still there and she is thriving. If you'd asked her that question 6 months in, I think she probably would have gone, there's no way I'll be staying. But she's still there. And that is all about, Marley, the safe spaces that you mentioned, creating those safe spaces, creating that place where somebody can, as I said, I've got ADHD. I know that emotional dysregulation, when you are frustrated and upset, you just need to go somewhere and go, this is really rubbish right now, and I just need somebody to listen to me. I don't want you to action it. I don't want you to do anything with it. I don't want you to take anything I say seriously and therefore think that because I've just resigned on the spot, I actually mean it. Just be that safe space. And I had numerous conversations with her where she would spend an hour just downloading, and I would check in a couple of days later and go, right, okay, how are you feeling today? Are you okay? Do I need to action anything you said to me? And the answer was most often no, because actually all she needed was that safe space to work through the emotion and what had been a really rubbish experience somewhere else. So it's not always straightforward.
Thank you.
Can I ask you and Marley, to both of you, same question. How does that sound in terms of the old school of management? You identify a talent, nurture a talent, and they do the job really well. That's where the difference is. You just described exactly that. You're a good manager. You knew what the strength of that individual was. You allowed them that freedom to express themselves, and they thrived. And Marley also did that exceptionally well by job description. This is what I want you to do. I don't care about anything else. Can you do this? Come on and ask for it. And you appointed the right person to do the job. So I think it goes back to this concept. Our managers should be able to do that, and they're not equipped to do it. That's unfortunately. They just don't know how to manage talent. I have seen too many autistic people or dyslexic people demoted to do admin jobs, the kind of thing they hate doing, but they've been given the task because they don't think they can do anything more than that. And that means really a talent goes to waste.
But that means you've got to really look at your own internal resource. You've got to have a cracking recruitment team and a really good HR team that's doing one-to-ones on a regular basis. Your line managers have got to be trained to do this properly. And I mean, Marley, you've gone through the process. I know, Tanya, you went through the process really efficiently over and over. But this is really limited. The fact that I can point to you two guys, sorry, people, but I can't say there's a whole plethora of other companies doing it. I find that really disturbing, because we need to do this. This isn't a nice to do. This is an absolute must. We need them all in work, as many people as can work and want to work into workplace. They need to have opportunities to have careers and thrive and get married. They need to have opportunities to lift their whole communities that are around them. And I mean, one of the examples that we had, NASA, we're not masses of time, but if you could touch on the kickstart that we did at Microlink, because I think it's a really good example of how it should work, how it could work.
So that's actually very good, because both of the examples we've heard really came together very nicely in this one-off project we did. The kickstart was government funded, and we knew the neurodivergent cohorts who struggled to get into employment. As you described, the barriers was recruitment, there's interviews, they just weren't comfortable with it. And they were long-term out of work for more than 2 years on universal credit. So we went to the local job center. We said, we are looking for this particular profile of people for this particular job. And the job was accessibility and remediating PDF files. So we had London Local Council gave us a contract for remediating about 60,000 documents in 3 months. So we kind of thought, we know who we can get. So we went out to the unemployed youngsters, age of 18 to 24, and we found ourselves 15 of them. Government funded salary, great, 6 weeks of training. They delivered that contract on time and to an extremely low budget. It proved not only they did it, they loved it. Absolutely. When we came to the end of the project, they were so proud of what they'd achieved. Now, of course, our aim was to find them jobs afterwards, but it didn't happen because all the organizations who need to do this, they just simply say we have no budget, which is where we fell short. We couldn't get them jobs. But the concept is find the right talent who enjoys doing a job and they do it exceptionally well. You've got win-win for everyone. How do we make that happen is really the mystery that I'm still trying to solve.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, with all of this, with everything that you've said today, and it's about measuring, looking at what you had before, what you've done differently, what worked. And Marley, you mentioned some things didn't work. You mentioned it as well, Tanya. But learning from what doesn't work and sharing some of that experience. Sorry, Nasser, what did you want to say?
Marley, you know the accessibility very well. If you go to a typical person, and this is where I would say strength-based recruitment and really focusing on what they can do, or rather than worry about what they can't do. So if you do an accessibility PDF remediation, a typical person, if they paid enough attention and focused, and they could do about 50 pages a day, maybe 80. We had one individual did 270 pages a day. That's how super efficient they were. So that's the kind of example. That person, all they cared about, doing their job, doing it well and consistently. Where else can you get that kind of a candidate? Pay them, very low salary and keep him loyal and do the job every day. So that's a kind of example where we can achieve great things with low investment and high outcome. A really very low risk whatsoever. And organizations need it. It's not like they have to create jobs for just for the sake of it. Local authorities, public sector need to have that kind of a cohort, but they're not really going out to do it because they don't know what they're looking for, or they don't even think they have the budget to do it. And yet they're happy not to do it, like to break what the regulation expects them to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Look, Nasser, I think, good talent is post-COVID. Around the world, we saw that actually in all of the markets that we operate in, good talent it's just becoming more competitive, isn't it? Every organization is working hard to get the best people, right? And as they should. But actually, good talent extends to people who are disabled and neurodivergent as well, right? And I think that gives us in some ways. As other organizations are doing this well, I'd love to say it's just HSBC, but it's not. There are other organizations doing this well, and but it gives us a competitive advantage, right? Because we are tapping into a part of the talent pool that everybody else or a lot of other organizations are simply overlooking, right? So it's a significant competitive advantage, right? So. We'll take the best talent. We'll look in places and we'll look at people that some other organizations won't. And you know what? We're going to be better for it. We're going to be better able to serve our customers for it. We're going to be better able to serve our people as well. So that's that would be my advice to people who are still somewhat skeptical about diversifying their workforce.
And
Tanya?
can I just add, the fact we're having this conversation, the fact that we have HSBC and an EY case study, if you reverse a few years ago, these conversations weren't happening. They are happening in organizations now. Neurodiversity is something that people are talking about. There is definitely more awareness around it. And I think that's a really positive thing, and it can only go in one direction from here. And it will have a knock-on impact on education, healthcare, everything else. Because as soon as businesses prioritize this, it does tend to have that broader impact as well. We know the UK are well ahead globally in terms of neurodiversity and the work we're doing. The rest of the world will also catch up as well. So I think we've got to recognise that we're at the start of something, and where people are doing amazing work, we need to keep sharing it. But I definitely think it is moving in the right direction.
A bit of a sobering thought about the numbers. Once upon a time, disability was a tiny fringe, maybe 2, 3, 4%, and then if they pushed it to 8%. Just imagine the recent developments. Well, neurodiversity is obviously going off this scale when it comes to employment. Then you have menopause for women, you have old age, then you have the traditional sensory loss, hearing and vision. So we're not talking about minority now, we're talking about the workforce need to be done to be treated differently. And as you said, the talent is not like endless amount of talents as a, some sort of a conveyor belt that you can just hire anyone you want when you want it. Now you need to work harder to find the right people. And those right people happen to have these issues. We call them conditions, not disability, because what happens to them makes them disabled, not because they are. The condition doesn't make the person disabled. So the right approach, what you just suggested, will take care of everyone. And in the future, we won't have a choice. We won't be selective. Say, you have that problem, we don't want you. Actually, we want you. What do we need to do for you? We need to come to us.
Thank you, Nasser. Marley and Tanya, can I come to you and have last thoughts? We've got 4 minutes. Marley, if people were going to look at doing this within their own business, or they're encouraging their own business to crack on with this, rather than just talk, we have a little bit more action. What would you say would be first steps? What do they need to do?
Of course. Wow. Look, I think the first thing, in a nutshell, look, you want to look at that end-to-end process with a magnifying glass, right? How do you start? The people that are going to be working with you to make this happen, you want that expertise, right? You want to work closely with experts, whether it's somebody like Tanya or, if you have the in-house expertise, great. If not, make sure you've got it, right? This is not easy. It's quite a complex thing, right? But you want to look at every part of the process end to end, right? And obviously onboarding the individual, that recruitment process is perhaps the easy part, right? As Tanya rightly mentioned, once those individuals come into the organization, creating an environment, both culturally, but also the practical basics of the right workplace adjustments to making sure that actually the people managing those new employees are suitably trained is really important, right? But I think you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I think you're going to make some mistakes. And I think, look, the disabled and neurodiverse community, are reasonable people, right? I think if you make mistakes in good faith, that's okay. We all make mistakes, right? But I think, until you try it, you aren't going to get, you aren't going to do it, or you aren't going to achieve anything. And I've got to say, guys, look, this is one of the projects within my world which has given us the greatest amount of satisfaction, right? Quite literally changing people's lives. There's really no joy like it. So all the time, effort, and no doubt investment, it is rewarding in a way that, other programs which might have a more commercial slant just simply never will be. And, my last words will be, do it, give it a go. It is worth it on so many levels, right? Commercial, culturally, from an inclusion perspective, this is something you have to do as an organization.
Thank you, Molly. That's wonderful. Tanya.
Just on the life-changing piece, absolutely. It changed my life. I was doing something completely different 3 years ago, and here I am talking about neurodiversity. So I think there are 2 points that I'll pick up on in terms of where to start. Firstly, education. Education at an organisational level, and it is about layers of education. So awareness is one thing, but we talked about line managers a second ago. I talk a lot about accidental line managers, those that find themselves line managing people simply because they have climbed to a certain rung on the ladder and suddenly find themselves having to do it. Not everybody is a good manager. Not everybody wants to be a manager. So giving those individuals as much support as possible. One of the things that we actually did in my team just before I left was actually in the broader team was actually split out that line management and the performance management responsibility.
Yeah.
So you've got that safe space that you can go and talk about actually your performance as opposed to that person who's directly line managing you. It's a really simple thing to do that can make a massive difference to those that are neurodivergent. And then the second piece I would like to say is that nobody has fixed this yet.
Yeah.
We're at the start of a journey and we're all
truth.
muddling our way through, and nobody has got all of the answers, but absolutely do start, because together we can figure them out.
That is wonderful. And we're at time. I wanted to say a huge thank you to Marley and Tanya, and obviously NASA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really important, guys. Just go out and do it. These people are happy to help. Tanya consults. I'm sure if you need her details, we'll be sending out the recording. We'll be sending out loads of information along with the links that NASA's put in the chat. But thank you ever so much for joining, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much,
Take
Tanya.
care.
Pleasure to meet you. Take care, guys. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.